Hi, I'm John Jeffries, President and CEO of Callahan Associates. Thanks for taking time to join us today on what we're calling strategy briefs. So I'm joined with my colleague Jay Johnson. Jay is the Chief Collaboration Officer at Callahan Associates. And Jay, why don't you take a minute and talk to folks about why we're starting the series strategy briefs, why we think it's an important topic now, and a little context for what we're going to be doing over the coming months.
Sure, John. Yeah, welcome everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. Certainly we recognize this is a time of tremendous uncertainty. Questions about the physical health of our community. What's the economic impact of all this on our community, on our members? How is this impacting our employees? How long will this last? And what will it look like as we start to come back? All those questions are certainly top of mind for a lot of us. But I think, John, we've heard from a lot of credit unions that either they're still trying to navigate the short term while looking at some of the long-term challenges, or coming to us and asking us for thoughts on how should we approach planning in this environment, because they continue to recognize that it's critical to think about the long term, even as you navigate these short-term challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's really paramount, Jay. And we saw it through 2008, 2009, and other crises. You need to keep your eye on the short-term challenge that you have, but also be thinking about what are the implications in the medium and long term, and how do we balance those investments that we need to make to respond. And I think right now, Jay, one of the things we hear is there's so much uncertainty, right? There's so many ranges of possibility we just don't know, that it's really important to start thinking about what are those questions we should be talking to our teams and boards about. How do we frame it? So it's I think right now maybe less about answers and more about working with your stakeholders about asking those right types of questions.
That's right. I mean, we know, we've had a number of virtual roundtables recently, and even did a virtual planning session this last weekend. We know there's a lot of current activity going on. A lot of actions credit unions are taking in the near term to resolve this. But I think even during the planning session we did this weekend, some of those longer term goals and questions are still out there. And you're right. It may not be that we have the answers, but are we asking the right questions? Are we thinking about the right questions as we go through this? And maybe it's thinking, John, as you're saying, maybe part of it's all right, what do we need to do in the near term? What are those medium term and maybe longer term steps we might want to take as well? And how might we think about those?
Yeah. So Jay, I think the series is really about what are we hearing credit union executives talk about, what's on their mind, what's their agenda, if you will, what are the types of questions they're asking, and really share those so the broader credit union community can be thinking about how might we apply these themes to our plan and our retreat with our board later this year. So the thought is over the next 3 or 4 months, we'll do these every couple weeks. And as we hear input from the marketplace, we use that to be the catalyst for what we talk about on these calls.
That's right. So I think, we want the market's input here. And we'll give some information of how people can reach us on this. But, I think, John, as we've heard consistently, that there's just so many actions that have been being taken by credit unions to really help members through this. Interested to hear what you have found maybe as a kind of unique or just intriguing step that a credit union you've talked with has taken.
Yeah, I think to answer this one, Jay, I'm a little biased, right? My credit union here in Arlington sent out a note. They've been sending out emails to the members about every 10 days or so, and the one this week really struck me, right? And it was about how they're helping the community, where they're donating time and money and effort to really support those in the community. And I felt so strong. I sent the CEO a note back saying, "This makes me proud to be a member." And I think I might be unique, right, in a lot of ways. But I think the more we can help the community organizations, help members who are struggling through this, it's really positioning credit unions as part of the solution. So that's a really personal example, but it really struck me as really interesting. How about you?
Yeah, that's a great one. And it really has been fascinating just to see how different credit unions have approached this just on a local basis. One of the unique ones that I heard was, and maybe it's not unique, but it's just one that stuck with me was, obviously branch operations have undergone a significant change over the last month or so. Shorter hours, appointment only, drive-through only. So there's a lot of branch personnel that are being moved into different roles to help members navigate through different issues that they might be having. But I thought one interesting idea that I heard one credit union take was actually turning their branch staff that wasn't working directly with members in person. They converted them to outbound call center, and this credit union literally called every member. And it was just the message of, I'm from the credit union, just wanted to let you know we're looking out for you. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. And it just, that's a very powerful statement. As you said, given all the uncertainty, certainly credit unions are thinking about it, but every family is thinking about the uncertainty right now. So just, I thought that was a really personal and just strong touch about who the credit union is, and that's what we're about is you. So I thought that was a really neat way of deploying some resources these days.
Yeah, and I think that's shows members that, hey, we care, right? We're in this together, and we care about you. We care about your well-being, and we want to be part of the solution if something happens. And I think from a strategy standpoint, Jay, that really drives towards sort of this theme of engagement, right? And I think that's been a priority for a lot of credit unions is how do we drive organic engagement with our members over the long term, right? And the more our members can be over time, the more profitable they'll become because they'll look to us first. So, from a strategy standpoint, do you have any thoughts on how we might use engagement theme to think about the current environment or the current challenges? That seems to be an evergreen topic with credit unions is that engagement. But with the current circumstance, how might that play in?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It is a consistent theme for credit unions to talk about member engagement and employee engagement too, of course, is critical for credit unions. And I think maybe, well, certainly it's a part of a lot of credit unions already. I think maybe this situation has underscored also the importance of community engagement. We've seen credit unions stepping up in so many different ways in their communities, whether that's donations to food banks. We had a great article this week on creditunions.com about University of Kentucky and their support of local restaurants. And so there's a lot of ways communities are on the radar too. So, as consultants, John, we like boxes. We like So one way you can think about that is kind of a 9x9 box. And if you thought of short-term, medium-term, long-term, and then you thought of members, employees, community, and you just thought through maybe a couple of questions around this situation and how that might influence your planning. So you might ask the question, just what are we learning from this experience? What is it telling us about these different stakeholders, and are there some unexpected challenges that we're starting to see that maybe we didn't realize were there? I'm sure some of these, if you had said, this environment, we're going to have this kind of economic shock, some you could probably anticipate, but I think there are probably a lot of new learnings as well. So what are those learnings, and then what do those learnings mean for ways that our credit union might address some of the gaps that we see? And I think there's probably across all three of those stakeholders, members, employees, and the community, again, there's probably a lot of things on our radar now that we can think of, not only near term, which credit unions are already deep into, but medium term and long term that we could move forward on.
Yeah, and Jay, I think one of the other opportunities there is, as you build out that matrix, right, you mentioned the gaps, but I think also the opportunity side, how can we use this to strengthen ourselves going forward? And where can we play an even greater part in our members with our employees, make the credit union the best place they ever worked. You hear a lot of credit unions talk about it, and really make the credit union a pillar of the community. What would that look like? And I think that there are some challenging days ahead, right? On the financial side, right? You don't have, what are we up to, 24 million unemployed Americans,
Right.
without that happening, without the loan challenges that come along with it. But yeah, as we navigate the short term, from a medium to long term, how do we think about some opportunities that could really be a catalyst for growth through this?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, if we think back to the Great Recession and what came out of that, certainly I think a lot of credit unions realized new opportunities coming out of that too, as painful as that was for so many credit unions. But you just think about it from a community standpoint. Yeah, what new partnership opportunities might there be? We've already seen some credit unions partnering with their local cities on different loan programs. What might that open up to? Employees, the credit union we did the planning session with this weekend virtually, they were really reflecting on what this situation has meant to their culture, and told them about their culture. And in their case, it was very positive.
Yeah.
They'd certainly were always very conscientious of their culture, but anytime you go through a crisis, I think it tells you what you're really about as an organization. And I think they feel really good about culturally and the again, engagement by their employees as they went through this. And then with members, we're also learning, they're learning new behaviors, maybe new ways to interact with the credit union. In some cases, they're having to navigate obviously a very different financial situation. But again, there's probably lessons in all of those areas, questions that you could ask and lessons you could take away that could help really inform where you invest, and maybe it's about reprioritizing in some cases. Some things may move up to the top, or some things may have to drop off. But I think this situation can tell us a lot about where we are and where we might go.
Yeah, and Jay, you talk about engagement, but then also about the reprioritization of investment, right? And I think one of the emerging themes that we're starting to hear a lot of credits talk about is how do we think about keeping score in new ways around this? And I think that maybe will be a topic of a future session. But as you think about reprioritizing investment, you're really thinking about what are the outcomes we want to have for our members, our employees, our communities, in the medium to long term, right? So more of a strategic lens around that, and really build alignment with the management team and board around what are those new types of metrics or ways we want to keep score to help us respond to this. That could be a catalyst for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this probably will influence your goals. Again, short term, as you said, John, we know it'll have an impact. We don't know quite what, but that it is going to influence what that scorecard looks like. So certainly there's kind of short term adjustments you may need to make to your scorecard, but you're right. It also may inform some of the long term scorecard, the way you set that up. And again, I think these kinds of discussions are just a really good way to reflect on about who we are as a credit union and what we want to accomplish, and just may bring a different perspective to those discussions than maybe you would have had in the past.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think most companies have learned in the past 5 or 6 weeks in terms like everyone's operating in a new environment is the fact that the traditional, hey, we're going to sit down for a day and a half and talk about stuff doesn't really work this way. So you may need to think about bite-sized conversations around this, especially when you're talking about such a dynamic environment with so much uncertainty. If you're really changing fundamental things such as what does success look like, right? How do we build alignment around that and really make sure, as you started earlier, Jay, with how do we make sure we're asking the right questions, right? And that takes some reflection a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even in a traditional kind of weekend planning session, it's tough to really digest some of those conversations. You need some time to reflect. So I think you're right, John. I think, in a way, maybe this environment, and as people get used to these remote interactions, it may actually create a healthier environment for coming back to some of those discussions periodically, those questions, because you're right. The changes that are going on around us are going to continue to influence that. But I think the more dialogue you have, the more clarity you get about what really matters in this environment.
Right. So Jay, I think as we wrap up, our first strategy brief here, it sounds like what you're saying is, be sure as you have strategic dialogue to think about the different stakeholders you have, maybe members, it may be community, it may be employees, or each credit may be slightly different, but then also think about it, both in responding to the near term, but be sure you're spending some time on medium to long term. Is there any other ways or things you think people should be thinking about now?
Well, I think a lot of it's just being sure that you are reflecting on what's happening. Obviously, there's so much information coming into the credit union right now from members, from employees, from the community. But yeah, I think you're right. You have to think of it over the long term. So I think distilling a little bit of that information and what it's rising to the top. What kind of themes are you see coming out of that information that's coming into the credit union? There's a lot of short-term noise isn't the right word, but some of this is going to be more short-term. But what fills up that really could tell us some things about the long term? I think that reflection and maybe documenting that reflection as you go through this is going to be important. Yeah.
So, Jay, I think if people want to engage, right, as we said earlier, right, this is really an industry-driven dialogue. Right? We're just sort of taking what we hear from credit unions and reporting it back out. So if there are questions or comments or things you think that we should be talking about or framing, or questions that you and your team are struggling with and want some help refining, please reach out. And Jay, we'll do this again in a week or two. And sort of keep this going through the summer so that hopefully by the time credit unions get to their fall planning session in August or September, they've had time to process and think about and really what do they want to frame the dialogue with their stakeholders around. Any last thoughts you might add?
Well, I think it's just going to be fascinating to watch how this all unfolds. Some of the innovation and interesting steps that credit unions take as they go through this. Different parts of the country are obviously impacted differently. So I just think you'll see a lot of interesting innovations come out of all this. So as you said, as we talk to credit unions, but as credit unions send us ideas, questions, I think that's going to be really valuable to help share as part of this discussion as well. So I'm looking forward to them.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for making this far in our first strategy brief, and hope you find it helpful, and please let us know what you find useful or how we can make it better. Thanks.